There's one question that God asks Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19, and it completely restores his identity and direction. By the end of this video, you'll understand why God doesn't correct Elijah. He asks a question that helps Elijah remember who he is. In fact, this question is what has helped me and others move from confusion and burnout and over-spiritualizing pain to clarity, grounded identity, confidence, and renewed direction. This is for you. And toward the end, I'm going to guide you through a simple inner healing activation based on this question. And when you do it, something inside realigns. So stay with me. If you're new here, I'm Jason Powell, a progressive Christian spiritual teacher and gospel artist, dad to two, who helps you awaken to the presence and power of God in you, without the shame and without the religious exclusion. Here in this channel, we raise our consciousness so we can manifest a more heavenly reality in our minds, our entire life, in the community, and in the world. So subscribe to this channel now so you never miss the latest video. You can also like this one so it tells the algorithm to send you more like this. Okay, let's go deeper. I want to be clear, this is not really a message about pushing through confusion and forcing clarity. Instead, this is an invitation to reconnect with identity before action. And when you reconnect with your spiritual identity, the inspired action follows. And Elijah's story proves that. Right in the middle of this Old Testament book, 1 Kings, in chapter 19, this powerful prophet Elijah experiences a major problem when his purpose gets lost. Have you ever experienced any kind of victory or good thing that happened for you, and then the purpose gets lost, or you lose sight of the bigger picture because of a distraction? That's what happened to Elijah when he got distracted by someone threatening his life. Elijah has just experienced this supernatural victory, because really he was the poster child for the supernatural at that time. And he was doing his best to awaken people to the reality of the Spirit of God, the Spirit of good, Yahweh, Jehovah, the great I am, the one spirit source that is the essence and the sustenance of all that is. And Elijah was a powerful prophet because he was able to tap the unseen realm and reconnect people with their well-being through miraculous demonstrations. One of the problems was, though, that in the land of Israel at the time, there were people who were worshiping these false external gods like Baal, which had people doing very harmful practices to try to gain the favor from the unseen realm. But it created a lot of harm, which produced actions like child sacrifices, self-mutilation, non-consensual sexual practices, etc. And so here was Elijah walking in the supernatural power of God to help people to shift out of that system so that they could bring back the blessing of God in their land and in their life. So here he is in the middle of this supernatural victory, calling fire down from heaven as a visible display against the prophets of Baal, establishing Yahweh as the one true power source. Yahweh is just another name for God. And then after this, Jezebel, who had influence of the surrounding areas and was over the prophets of Baal, threatened Elijah's life. What happened to Elijah? He went straight into fear, pandemonium, exhaustion, and ran for his life and wished that he were dead. He experienced a weight of massive depression. It says in 1 Kings chapter 19 and verse 3 that he ran for his life. Here's the tension. You can be anointed with the presence and power of God and still feel the real human emotion of fear or depression. Sometimes people think that just because you have a relationship with God or you're tapped into your spiritual identity, then that means you should just never feel bad. But you can awaken to who you are in God and who God is in you and still have to know how to manage the human emotions and do your best to do that. So sometimes we can confuse function with identity. But right at this point in the story, the text seems to slow down. So why don't we do that? In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 7, we read, "And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, 'Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you.' So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God." Verse 9, "And there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, 'What are you doing here? Why are you here?'" Notice God didn't give instructions in that moment. God asks a question. Perhaps it was a question in his spirit, which is the way many of us perceive the voice of God today. A voice rooted in the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. When that voice of good begins to ask a question to redirect your attention, watch out. Something great and powerful is happening. God asks a question here because questions awaken identity in a way that commands often never can. Now let's pause for a moment. If this is already reframing how you hear God and understand yourself, I want to invite you to a free spiritual empowerment masterclass. It's where we explore these identity restoring questions more deeply, drawing from insights in my book, Reimagine God, and how they can shift your life from the inside out. The link is below if you want it. reimaginegodnow.com/live. All right, let's keep going. God asks Elijah, "What are you doing here?" Not to shame him, but to help Elijah hear his own story. There's a powerful spiritual teacher and mind who wrote many books, one being The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Deepak Chopra frames it like this: self-inquiry is the gateway to transformation. That's just a big way of saying you got to think about what you're thinking about. How often do we stop to think about what we're thinking about? Actually do the self-introspection work to think about what we're thinking about. When we do that, insight and answers can come. So what does Elijah do? Elijah answers with exhaustion, isolation, and fear. And God lets him just speak it out more than once. We see it in verse 10. So he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." Notice God didn't interrupt and answer the question of why Elijah was there. I believe God was giving Elijah space to remember his identity and not to impose it on him, especially at this crucial time. And we know that because later on in the text, what's going on inside of Elijah manifests itself on the outside. He finds himself in the middle of a strong wind. Was it a tornado or a hurricane? He finds himself in the middle of an earthquake. Then he finds himself surrounded by the fire. And after all that external chaos, finally, he gets to the silence where he encounters the voice of God, the still small voice. We talk about the power of this still small voice in our related video. The title is "What God Whispered to Elijah Reveals the One Pattern for Breaking Generational Lack." You can see a link to it up here somewhere. The tumultuous experience going on inside of Elijah is manifested in the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. It's also a representation of how Elijah stayed in the cave until he found his center. Because then we see the whisper of the still small voice of God, the voice of good, speaking to him, realigning his identity so that he could realize that what he was really there for was to remember who he is. And that the truth of him is not the craziness and the chaos of what the world is shouting around him, but who God says he is on the inside. One who is realigning people with their true source, disentangling them from the false external idols that steal their identity, but knowing that God within and among them makes them whole, makes them love, makes them happy, and helps them even when they're not, and releases them from the prison of external validation. The God who says, I am in you, and you are in me. And behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Elijah was a precursor to Jesus, awakening people to the truth of the presence and power of God. And this is a powerful pattern for us to know what to do when we encounter life challenges. We've got to regain our sense of true identity. And that mystic Neville Goddard says it like this: you don't change your world by changing circumstances directly. You first change your concept of self, because the outer adjustments will simply be futile readjustment of surfaces, to quote Goddard, if we don't first realign our self-concept. Do you see how in Elijah's story, this question from God restores his direction because it leads him to introspection? What good question of spirit is leading you to introspection right here and right now? To go within, to consider what you're thinking about, what path you're on. Is it a path of self-acceptance? Is it a path of believing for greater good? Is it a path of finding your inner harmony and your inner peace? Is it a path of letting go of external validation and claiming the truth of who you are, spirit, soul, and body? Is it a path of allowing that goodness to flow through you and believing that the best and the highest is possible for you? Notice after Elijah names his pain, God does 3 things. Number 1, God reminds Elijah that he's not alone. Number 2, God reveals a future beyond the cave. Aren't you glad there's a future for you beyond moments of isolation or beyond your most challenging seasons? And number 3, God recommissions Elijah, not from pressure, but from clarity. Our vision flows from inner alignment, not solely from external striving. Notice how his direction returned once his identity in God got stabilized. We're talking about this major prophet Elijah who still needed to have an inner stabilizing. So don't be hard on yourself when you need some inner stabilizing. It's a part of the human experience, and it's also a part of your spiritual becoming. Now let's take a moment and do what God invited Elijah to do. Take a breath and exhale. Beyond the winds, beyond the quakes, beyond the fires, there is a still small voice. Ask yourself without judgment, where am I right now? What am I carrying? What part of me needs to be heard? Now repeat softly, I am allowed to pause. I am safe to name my truth. My clarity is rising. I show myself compassion. My clarity is rising as I show myself compassion. God meets me now in this honest awareness. This is how identity begins to be reawakened and reformed from despair to empowerment, from hopelessness to hopeful expectation. This is your time to reclaim your divine identity. Why? So that you can go forward into your greater, so that you can experience the presence of I am now. I am is the mystical name for God, and so that you can no longer be defined or held captive by your past. There's blessing for you, there's grace for you, there's beauty for you, there's fulfilled desire for you, there's presence and blessing for you. Be bold enough to claim it. If this spoke to you, join me in the free spiritual empowerment masterclass linked below, reimaginegodnow.com/live. And if you're ready to go deeper, Reimagine God, the paperback, the audiobook, and the ebook bundle will walk you step by step through restoring identity, healing confusion, and partnering with God in a new way. You're not lost. You're being reoriented to the truth of spirit, the truth of who you are in God and who God is in you. And this makes all the difference for your spiritual life, your mental and emotional life, your physical life as you live in this body, and in the work and passion that you have to express in the world around you. Remember, when you reimagine God, you reimagine yourself and the world you live in. See you in the next video.